And it looks like we have a quorum. And so we're going to approve. Well, first, what we're going to do is we're going to see if there are any public comments. No, nobody.
Hey,
Okay. Yeah.
Sherry, David Gerstenfeld let me know that he has a individual that he would like to introduce. So
Okay.
maybe now's a good time to toss it over to Dave and let him do that.
That's great.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Sherry. Hi, everyone. So Rosa Klein is with me, and she is the interim deputy director here at the Oregon Employment Department. So wanted her to be able to join us today since I'll be leaving soon. In a month or two, my sense of time is off. She's coming to us most recently from being the interim executive director at the Board of Pharmacy, and has worked in state government in a bunch of capacities in different agencies for quite a while, including having been the governor's policy advisor for the Oregon Employment Department, among other agencies in Governor Brown's administration. So pleased to have her helping me out as we're nearing the end of my tenure at the Employment Department, and wanted her to get a chance to see the executive committee of the State Workforce Board in action.
All right.
Rosa,
is she here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just say thank you for allowing me to join you for today and let me learn about what your work is.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming. We're happy to have you. So thank you so much. And then I believe we have minutes to approve. Is that right? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like for someone to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 19th. So we need a motion and a second.
So moved. Second.
All right. I think that was Ann and Kim. Was that right? Okay. All in favor can raise your real hand, virtual hand.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody need to abstain? No? Okay. All right. Looks like we're rolling. We're cooking with gas. All right. Our next, do you have the agenda you can pull up? I like to go over it together. Possible. Thank you. Can scroll down a little bit. So our next is Lindsay. However, Todd, you said that Clay has something that we need to approve. Is that right?
Yes.
I would like to make an audible if possible, if Clay is around. You know, as we go, we might lose people. We do have a 7 quorum right now, but I don't. So I'd like to see if Clay would be okay, because his is like 10 minutes to present that, so we can go ahead and get that taken care of, and we don't have to rush and be nervous, and Lindsay can settle into her presentation. Is that okay?
Okay with me.
Okay, well, let's do it.
All right. Well, let me get situated. I wasn't quite thinking we were going to be ready for this yet.
I know, I sprang it on you at the last minute.
You did. So, but that's okay. I think everybody knows me, but just in case, Clay Martin, I am the WTDB Initiatives Analyst, supporting the WTDB, and a part of HEC is Office of Workforce Investments. And I'm going to be talking to you today about the data validation policy. The policy itself is in your packet. I'm not going to go through it in great detail. This is going to be just sort of a summary of some key points, and then the action item for your approval of policy. So let's go to what I'm going to cover. I just want to cover very briefly.
Hey,
you might be sharing your notes slide instead of the main slide.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Thank you. Yeah, there's something, give subtitles a try, is blocking the view.
Oh, all right. Hang on one second. So how about Is that better?
Sure. I mean, slideshow mode was fine too. It just, yeah, this is fine.
Okay. So this is what I'm going to cover. Why we need the policy in the first place, why it's coming to you for approval, what the policy does generally, and then the recommended action. So first of all, and sort of at a high level, the main reason the policy is needed is because it's required by WIOA. The law expects that the data sent to them is going to be reliable, and they require that there be a process established and a policy where necessary to make sure that that data is valid and that there are procedures in place to ensure the quality that comes to them. The other thing, though, is it's just sort of good housekeeping for any sort of database management program to make sure that you have the highest quality data within the database that you're managing. And this data, just so that you know, is data on all of the participants that are being served, as well as all of the various services that they are receiving, and all of the eligibility documentation that's necessary and required, and the outcomes for each of these participants. So it's a big database with a lot of moving parts, and so data validation is a helpful practice. So what does the policy, or why is it coming to you? One thing that I believe I have mentioned in the past, but if not, this is a refresher, is that relatively recently, the Office of Workforce Investments at HEC went through a process of sort of defining the responsibilities for various policies that the office administers. And one of the big breaks was a focus on those policies that only pertained to local workforce boards, and that they tended to be operationally oriented or monitoring or compliance oriented. And these were handled by a team called the Title I team. Title I is a reference to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Title I, which is where the local boards appear in the law. But, or rather not but and, there was a recognition that there were other policies that went beyond local workforce boards and extended to the system. So they were policies that were related to the system, and those were ones that had a variety of different partners covered by the policy. And there were ones that were more governance, where the governor, within the law, it says the governor must establish a policy to do X, Y, or Z. And those policies are referred to as WTDB policies, and the WTDB approves those. And as staff as a staff supporting the board, I work to coordinate those policies. This process is a pretty detailed process where we first develop policies through subject matter expertise, and then internally we gather other subject matter experts to review the policies. Then we send it out for partners and their experts to take a look at the policy, and finally we send it out for public comment. All along the way, there is a work group established among partners or of partners, the WTDB policy work group, that sort of shepherds the process, sort of makes key approvals along the way before it gets to you, the executive committee. And so that's sort of what's gone into this policy before it comes to you. What the policy actually does, I won't go through all the details. The policy itself essentially establishes the programs that are covered. So this one includes a variety of different programs in WorkSource Oregon. And so that's, that makes it a system policy. And then it also establishes the framework under which data validation is going to occur. Data validation itself is essentially an endeavor to compare the online electronic data with source documentation to make sure that it's accurate and valid and reliable. It's the process itself is based on a sample of records. Each local board, a sample is generated for each local board, and then those who go out and do the work use those records, and then on site, typically, they validate based on the documents that are retained at each local board. It's performed annually, and we report the results of that to the Department of Labor. And then if there are any issues or problems or concerns, we can deal with those in real time as folks are out with the local boards, as well as, after the fact, if there's any sort of additional items needed. So that is an overview of the policy and sort of the process that that was required, or that it went through to get here to you today. We're asking for the executive committee to approve the data validation framework policy, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Clay. Are there any questions about the policy?
Clay, were there any issues raised with the board staff or the groups that you engaged in the development and feedback of the policy?
No, but that's a good question. Thanks, Kim. Internally, we worked collaboratively with the employment department, primarily in the sort of development of the initial draft, because they're, one of the big players in terms of managing the data system itself. And then we worked with partners, and along the way, we got some helpful comments, but nothing significant from a variety of different sources. But essentially, things move forward pretty smoothly from the original development to the product that you see before you today.
It feels pretty standard, pretty rote, huh? It's not super controversial.
Yes, one thing I will say is that these policies are not very exciting, and this is probably the least exciting of the not very exciting policies.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Anyone else about the most least exciting of the non-exciting policies? All right. Well, we do have to vote on it. And so, Clay, thank you so much for that. So I'd like a motion to approve. How should we say it, Clay? What are we approving?
You're approving the data validation framework policy.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve that.
I'll move
And a
approval of the policy.
Thank
I'm
you,
happy
Dr.
to
Benny
second.
and Venkat. All right, all in favor? You can hold up your hand, aye, your emoji. Anyone opposed? Anyone needing to abstain? No? Okay, so it is passed. And thank you so much, Clay, for being flexible. I was just like, I don't want to lose your effort at the end and not be able to do this. So we are all set. And so we are now going to turn it over to Lindsay.
Great. Hi, everyone. Hopefully this is a little more exciting then. We can just go up from here, right? So I am on the agenda today for a couple of reasons. One, I want to be able to update all of you on where we last left off with our April 4th planning session. We had 3 planning sessions, as you know, involving most of you and a significant group of others to work on the strategic plan and the scorecard idea. And so I want to tell you where we're at and what to expect really in the next 2 weeks. maybe even sort of less, by April 30th. You do have some, I think, doodle polls from Aaliyah in your inbox. One of them is for the executive committee. So please pay attention to that, because that is going to be a time when we do final approval for the strategic plan and the scorecard. I don't know if we have any of our analysts on. We also are going to be having a separate meeting with our analyst group, our very, very smart analyst group who have been with us for this ride. And they are going to help sort through, again, what data we have, what data we don't have that can support collection of the metrics that we home in on. With that, the strategic plan and the scorecard, I really spent last week combing through the very, very active chats from our virtual sessions, as well as all of my notes, as well as emails from a number of you. And so truly incredible, the level of participation. So thank you all, from you all as well as from your colleagues. So where we're at now is, after I was able to really sort through, especially on the metric side, what I would call outliers, just like ideas that were thrown out there, but that did not necessarily get a lot of traction compared to the metrics that have had some staying power ever since we did our in-person retreat in early March and the 3 planning sessions following. And so really with that list, doing a triple cross-check to make sure that those potential metrics are sort of backwards line of sight to the imperatives and the objectives, so that we are not straying far from that. And then balancing that with, is there actually data that we can collect or that we can leverage, even if it's not perfect, to get this information. So with that, and with an hour and a half conversation scheduled soon with our analysts, I will be then sending out a short survey. And the survey really goes back to a very early intention that you all said, and this was probably even back in February, of this truly needs to be practical. It needs to be boots on the ground, unromantic. What can we really measure and achieve? That does not mean, however, and I think this is a really important piece, that you as a board, with your vision and the metrics you select, and I'll just say this bluntly, make yourselves smaller to fit others' expectations. But by practical and boots on the ground, it does mean, are we sure we're measuring the right things that drive back to the 4 imperatives that are a core part, or the meat of your strategic plan. So that's the balancing act, right, that we're trying to strike here. So all that said, you all can expect to get that short survey. It will be SurveyMonkey and quite basic. And there will even be questions like, of these 2 choices, which is going to be more effective, more efficient, and yield the biggest impact? And there will be questions like, can you live with this? Like that level of practicality. So that's what to expect. And what we are hoping is that survey will go out next week. And we will have a fairly quick turnaround. We probably will ask for a 3 or 4 day turnaround. So if we get it out on Tuesday, we want it by Friday. So just a heads up to please watch for that. But the survey, again, should not be an hour long. Ideally, this is going to be a 15 to 20 minute survey. That's how much it should take up of your time. So that's what to expect. And then we're hoping that we will turn that around, finalize the plan with any feedback, and you all will have an opportunity to approve it. I think, Aaliyah, your doodle poll asked for times on the 30th and the 1st and the 2nd. If I'm remembering. Yeah, okay. So any questions just on the timeline and what will happen between now and final approval on the plan and the metrics? Okay, great. All right. Well, parallel to this, and I did want to give you as the executive committee an update. The Workforce Readiness Committee has also been quite active. They have held 4 different conversations. We have tracked those conversations. There has been some very solid line of sight from the first to the last. I think some common threads that they have really stuck to. And so we have had an opportunity to rewrite their charter. From my perspective, just as a third-party consultant, and Venkat, I would love you to speak up on this as well. I think it's a very different charter from the charter that the committee has operated on in the past. The prior charter really had a lot of what the board is doing, what the board's imperatives are, what the board's values and position are. This version of the Workforce Readiness Charter, I think, really speaks to what are the new opportunities and conditions based on the board's active refresh of their strategic plan and scorecard that the Workforce Readiness Committee should be taking advantage of. Also, additional sort of conditions and opportunities that really speak to the choices that that committee is making potentially for areas of focus in the next 1 to 2 years. And so that is undergoing edits right now, but the committee received the first draft of the new charter just on Monday. And I have gotten incredible feedback already. And I think people feeling very excited about the new charter, very bought in, and then just sort of the questions and issues being raised around what are the 2 issues that we're really going to tackle in the next 2 years. Is it going to be really focused on just one thing, or are we going to expand it a little? So that's the level of refinement I think that we're talking about. So I'll stop there. We're not sharing it yet because I do really want the committee members to be able to weigh in a little bit more before we share it fully with the executive committee. So I really just wanted to give you an update on that. Venkat, would you add anything to how you're feeling about where that's going?
Not a whole lot, Lindsay. I just wanted to say that it's coming down to 2 focus priority areas. And one was the OES promotion and expansion, and the second one was the Math Foundation. And I had some feedback for you that I sent, I think, last night. One was to expand that Math Foundation to more of a STEM foundation and give it a name. And the reasons, my reasons for that were twofold. One was just alignment with the governor's early education and workforce readiness priorities. And the second one was also a legislative fit. And all of this comes back to, our strategic plan and how we identified the governor and the legislature as our top customers. So I think alignment along those will really help set some direction for the Workforce Readiness Committee. And I think this the STEM focus would help us turn around Oregon STEM proficiency scores if we can pilot it in a few school districts. And that is why I think that's incredibly important for us to tackle. So thank you.
Great. I will add to that as well that I think part of the excitement that is to me at least palpable in the conversations across the Workforce Readiness Committee is drawn from the WTDB's strategic plan, very specifically the B of the WTDB agreements, which is bold and innovative. And so the pieces of pursuit of innovations that have clear benefits, including new technologies, partnerships and strategies, or the other language in there that you'll remember, taking of calculated risks and use of innovative approaches to overcome persistent workforce challenges. And so when Venkat shared the quite dismal numbers, especially when you look at 4th grade math outcomes compared to how spending has consistently gone up. and math outcomes have consistently gone down. I think those pieces of being bold and innovative, looking into technologies and tools that can fill these gaps, I think was another condition worth messaging and mentioning, in addition to aligning with the governor's priority, and being able to really come up with metrics that could stand behind these. I don't know if there are other WRC members on the executive committee or on today. Are there? No. Okay. Any questions or comments, thoughts just on that piece?
Well, I feel like that piece is an extension of the conversation we had about, what are our priorities, what are our roles, and how do we interface outward? Like that, this feels like a concrete example of what we were talking about. So I just wanted to elevate that.
Yeah. Yeah, Sherry, I think that's really important because the other piece that came up in the committee was, again, what is the strength and role that the WTDB overall should be playing, and therefore this committee should be playing in terms of, and as I think, Sarah, you have mentioned this as well, in terms of being the navigators of the system, the programs, the players, the stakeholders that could come together to make something happen. And so this committee also talked a bit about this is the role that we need to be playing as a committee around a big initiative like We're Dreaming Up, and being able to map, for example, the programs that could be implementers, even for the expansion and promotion of the Oregon Employability Skills effort, that there are so many other programs out there that could take that up in order to scale it out. And so again, it comes back to the conversation that you all have been having around we as a board being those networkers and navigators of the programs and the leaders who we can pull in to make that happen. Okay, well, so with that, what we wanted to spend the remainder of the time on was a set of strategic questions that I have been kind of tracking and wondering about as we've gone through the strategic plan and scorecard exercises. And so, Aaliyah, if you can pull up that document that I sent that is just called Strategic Implications and Questions. Great, perfect. So I'll just, I'm just going to sort of verbally narrate a bit what's on the screen here. Clearly, the reason you all have taken a dive into the 60 plus roles and responsibilities. And if you recall, on April 4th, we took a shot at trying to work more on that. We quickly got overwhelmed again, for good reason, right? But what you do need to know, if you don't know this already, is that Clay and Todd and I have chatted, and so there is still work being done by Todd and Clay and pulling in others to really refine those roles and responsibilities for two things. Because you'll remember we talked about adding columns to the roles and responsibilities piece in a way that we could work backwards from right to left to really understand the sort of the cascade of how we should be viewing these roles and responsibilities. And so one of those important columns was which of these roles and responsibilities can we either by data or just by gut say this has a higher impact on our customers, our board customers or our system customers than others in each of the sections, right? There are, I think, 8 sections. So if you were even to come up with 8 to 10 of the roles and responsibilities that really sort of rise to the top in terms of high impact on customer, then can you also make solid decisions about the 8 to 10 where the board, the WTDB, wants or needs higher influence, a higher role over. certain roles and responsibilities. And so that work is being done behind the scenes because, again, it is overwhelming. It's drinking from a fire hose. And so just know that the reason, obviously, this is so important in parallel process, right, with the strategic plan and the scorecard is, I think, once you all have a handle on what those high impact on customer and therefore needed additional or higher influence by board, you may also want to take a look at, do we have ways of measuring our own success within these roles and responsibilities? And do we want to add that into our scorecard at some point, right? Or do we want to substitute out? And so that's just a piece that I wanted to highlight. It probably seems fairly obvious when I state that, but I think what it also implies is that this scorecard that you will approve, hopefully by the end of April, does need to be considered we're being bold and innovative in trying on these metrics and committing to these metrics. But also there need to be consistent ways to come back to those metrics to assess, do we have the right ones or do we need different ones, especially dictated by our work on the roles and responsibilities? Some of our questions that we handle today, we'll get into a little bit of how that happens. So if we can scroll down, Aaliyah, these are the pieces that I wanted to talk more about. And that, perfect, you can stop just there. So we have talked about structure and process, right? I wanted to ask some very specific questions and just get you as the executive committee, your feedback and your ideas. So some state boards have a WEO compliance committee. And what this achieves is an ability to not let your quarterly board meetings or your monthly executive meetings get monopolized by just WIOA compliance, which is a risk, right? You don't want that. You're a strategy board and you want to maintain, that level. So it creates space to focus on bigger system goals. But at the same time, what we've heard during this process is there is not enough consistent checking and discussing, either by the full board or the executive committee or other committees, this is what I want to know, around, do we understand the outcomes on a regular basis coming out of the system? And that includes Oregon WorkSource and local boards. Do we understand what's working, promising practices coming out of the WorkSource system and again, I'll say local boards? And do we understand the issues and challenges? And so this relates somewhat to WEOA compliance, right? Because you need to be checking and understanding outcomes enough as a state board to be able to make decisions about which initiatives and interventions should we be supporting or highlighting. Where does this exist right now in the WTDB? I'm curious if there is a committee or a task force that does look at WIOA compliance and regularly look at outcomes, promising practices, or issues. Is it the KIC? Is it the policy work group? Is it the WESET? Or should it be? So I'm curious, and I just saw some faces like, oh. I don't know where this is. So that's the perfect example. So speak up, let me know. Does this exist? Should it? Where should it?
Hey,
Todd?
Lindsay, it's Todd. I'll go ahead and jump in really quick. Sorry, I had to make sure my phone was on mute. I think that it's historically varied. I think we've done some of that in the exec committee, a little bit in the KIC, but in the KIC committee, the Continuous Improvement Committee, we've regularly and consistently focused on the biennial assessment of the WorkSource Oregon system. I think also a second part of this is that we've struggled over time in the evolution of the scorecard, as you know, but have tried to, on a fairly regular basis until we sort of pushed pause and sought your help, brought it up and shared progress and outcomes on a handful of metrics. They were not, as you sort of touched on, WorkSource Oregon wide or necessarily informed by the entire workforce system. So yeah, I think it's been a smattering of a lot of different things over my tenure of the last several years. Has it been from one particular committee? No. Has it happened on a regular basis? Somewhat, but it's not been consistently structured within a particular committee or agenda slot over time.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Well, and the thing Todd is not saying also is that wherever it is, the staff has really been the leaders of making sure it gets done, right? So they synthesize and present to whomever it is what the compliance is, what we need to do, you know what I mean? So they are really the steady constant in how this all happens.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess I would just add, oh, sorry, David. I just saw your hand go up. My apologies. That we have staff, the boards have staff groups that come together and talk about compliance. At least I know there's one group that meets monthly that I think is just staff from boards, local boards. And then Kurt, I believe, also convenes a group sort of as needed to focus on compliance issues. So there could be some connection there. Those are the experts. You know, I mean, they live and breathe this stuff every single day. So there might be an opportunity to pull in people who, you know, do this every day.
So there's two. So local workforce development board staff meet monthly. Is that the one convened by Kurt, or that's separate?
No, that's separate. And then I don't even know, and Todd, you or Clay may know this better than I. I think that the group that Kurt convenes includes compliance staff, but is focused more on policy development that's related to compliance. So there's a connection there, but honestly, I can't tell you much more of the detail other than I do know that there is a compliance group that is comprised of local board staff, and there might be staff from the state as well, honestly, from OE that attend those meetings monthly as well.
And is that, and forgive my ignorance, but is that, so that's great to know about those two. Is that separate from WSET?
Yes. Yeah. The WSET is leadership of the different, and I've never served on WSET, so again, David probably would do a better job of describing this. But leadership from the state agencies that are called out in WIOA, and then there's been somebody from the Oregon Workforce Partnership also sitting on that group. But that's my perception is that the WSET has been at the leadership level. Let's talk big picture. And the compliance group is talking nitty gritty details. How are we reporting this? How do we enter this? Much more boots on the ground. How do we stay in compliance and tackle different challenges?
Okay, great. David, can you shed light on this as well?
I'll agree with what Kim said about the WSET, and it's the state level leadership from the various WIOA programs trying to coordinate, stay aligned, talk about issues. I know that there are lots of discussions about compliance, so we're, for the employment department, we follow up on our own compliance. We have fund visits from the Department of Labor. I know that OWI at HEC gets those also. We work closely with HEC. My experience on the state board has been that we have not had much connection there. I don't want the state board to be focused on the compliance pieces, because frankly, a lot of them are not what we should be focused on. But I do like some check of having a formal part of the state board, like you're suggesting, do that, because
Yeah.
it seems like the board should know, are we in compliance? Where are the areas that aren't, and what are we doing to hold whoever accountable to make sure that we get into compliance?
Yeah. Okay. And so that's great to hear, because Kim, hearing that the local board staff meeting monthly and they're super focused on the nitty gritty, like on how to report, like, yeah, the state board doesn't quite honestly want to touch that. That's just not any, right. But I would love to find out more about what group Kurt convenes. And then David, what you're saying is, yes, the WESET is the state leadership level of the various WIOA program leaders, and they're focused on compliance. Do they also collect like the outcomes and the?
So WISIT is not focused on compliance. They are focused more on strategy coordination among the state programs.
Great.
It is more at the technical staff level at the employment department, and it's more ad hoc, working closely with OWI and others on the reporting and things like that.
Okay. So what you suggested, David, if I heard you right, is the state board, you don't want to get weighed down in compliance, right? And that is true. But there is a minimal probably level of reporting or the state board needing to understand, if there are issues, or I'm just filling in words here.
Yeah.
So
what I was envisioning, and I thought I was kind of restating what I heard you suggesting, which I support, is having some group, and maybe it's a committee, maybe it's staff, although I know that OWI staff have limits because there are a limited number of them and they're already doing a lot. But there needs to be some kind of report up, I think, to the state board of either, yes, we are fully in compliance, super high level, we had a compliance review or a program evaluation from the Department of Labor that they said it was great, or they suggested this, and identifying areas where there are non-compliance and making sure that the state board knows what the plan is so that we can be doing that oversight and know that we're on the path to being fully compliant, which shouldn't take a lot of time, but I think is a necessary component.
And who leads currently? Is there a lead on WESET? Is that an OWI thing? Or
I'll jump in. I would say there's a good mix of leaders there.
okay.
Lindsay, typically Julia has led those meetings. We've also in those meetings had rotating facilitators of the group.
Okay.
So I think it's been well, I'm not sure Julia's on, but she might want to jump in. But I think my perception over the last several years, it's been sort of a shared leadership, and not particularly any one individual that's necessarily spearheading those efforts.
Okay.
But Lindsay, I want to focus though on this board's specifically our interface. So, we have things that we do. We look at the plans of the local boards, we review, we get the material, so there are things that we do. It's just that it's a multi-headed hydra. We talked about this before with things with HEC and things with OED. There's different people doing pieces of it. So partly I wonder for this board, if it might be useful to have a committee that looks at the overall elements of the compliance, just so we know what they all are, just so they come before us, just so we have an interface. But I don't know if our particular role is the compliance. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, yes,
Right,
it is the
right.
compliance in certain areas, but it also is oversight. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. of the compliance pieces. And so for any kind of committee for this board, I would think it would be better at a little bit higher level outside of the things that we get annually. And I wouldn't want to triple or double the work for staff when elements of this are already being done.
Mm-hmm. So that is really important, which is why I ask if this already exists somewhere and why I keep asking about the WSET, because I'm just wondering if that, and the amount of time we're spending on this, by the way, should not be viewed as proportional to how much time overall the board should spend on compliance. I want to make that very clear. But what I do see and what I do not understand is how does the workforce board get just the right amount, and from who, of consistent information about compliance elements, and yes, we're in compliance, or these are our areas of concern. But then even more important, right, and this may not, you don't have to consider this the same as compliance, but do they also have a consistent and regular input of, these are our system outcomes, these are our promising practices bubbling up from the front lines and our local partners, and these are the consistent or perpetual issues of concern bubbling up, those three things. And so to me, there is a little bit of compliance and understanding, and then there's outcomes, promising practices, persistent issues of concern that so far do not seem to have a consistent pathway to the state board, because you all have said repeatedly the state board needs to be able to see the data, hear the data, in order to make decisions about how to support the system, right? So that's part of what I'm asking too, is it once a year that maybe it is the WSET that reports on in compliance issues of concern? Is it twice a year that the board, or is it just the executive committee, or is it once a quarter, where you actually have a deliberate part of your agendas? I know the executive committee meets monthly, correct? And so is it every 3 that you have on the agenda a real opportunity to hear outcomes, like numbers, what's working, and issues of concern? So this is where I'm, when I look at your committees, I don't see a place for that unless it is part of the executive committee role. There's your executive committee, your workforce readiness committee. You have your KIC, which has been responsible for assessments, very similar recommendations in 2024 as there was in 2023, right? And so I do see that as sort of separate. You have your policy work group. So that's why I'm asking about this one very specific. Ben.
Yeah, thanks. Lindsay, I think you're asking pretty nuanced questions about the board and committee roles and the time that should be dedicated to different types of activity and the cadence for its involvement in those activities. I'm not confident that this is, I'll just speak for myself. I'm not confident that that we're going to get that we're going to get great answers to those, to sort of working through those details in this setting. I would recommend, and this may fly in the face of preparation that my own staff has done with you or with this committee, but I'll go ahead and say it anyway. I mean, I would recommend that this be brought back to the executive committee as a proposal from staff for how we would operationalize this responsibility or interest that the board has in monitoring, or at least sort of overseeing, providing a strategic leadership for the public workforce system, including WIOA related activities, without being involved deeply in compliance, which is clearly not something that can be done via a board, right? That compliance, as I understand it, WIOA related compliance, is a responsibility of staff, which isn't to which isn't to minimize maybe the way that needs to be brought to the board in a transparent fashion, right? Or the board has a role in setting the expectations and performance measures and that upon which those compliance activities are based. But I just think I think there's some staff. My own view is that these kinds of process and structure related questions are maybe best handled through a recommendation from staff, maybe working through the chair to then bring back to this committee as here's a proposal for how we use subcommittees and use board time going forward. That's where I am. I think these are very hard questions to answer in this setting.
Okay. If others agree, what I would say is I would not want you as the executive committee. I mean, I know this isn't exciting stuff. Structure is not exciting, but it can become very, very important to implementing what you all want to try on with your scorecard. And your ability to effectively do that. And so I don't want surprises. You wouldn't want your staff to give you something that is surprising, right? So these other questions, if anybody has high-level thoughts on, are there committees that have reached a natural end? Are there ones that have staying power? Are there ones that should be put on pause? Are you interested in pursuing the work group style more than a permanent committee? I do think that you as an executive committee weighing in at that high level would be useful. And then if folks agree with Ben's proposal, then expect a proposal from staff on structure going forward that aligns with the plan and the scorecard.
Well, I just want to make sure we're all clear on what we're discussing, because it could just be me, but I feel like things are getting smushy. Like, on the one hand, we have been talking about metrics that we want for our customer. You know, we talked about this at our first retreat. We've talked about this through, but there's this separate and maybe connected strain of data that is something we get and we have to, compliance that we have. They're not exactly the same thing. And so, but I feel like we're talking about them as the same thing. So I just will admit I'm a bit confused, because there is this compliance element to the WIOA element of what we do, but then we were separately discussing metrics that we want to focus on, which in fact that could be a committee. If we're talking about these 2 to 3 things we're going to focus on permanently and 1 to 2 things we're going to focus on annually, that could be a committee. But when I hear WIOA compliance, I'm thinking of the annual things we do, the things that happen, the things that heck help, that's a different kind of thing. So I just don't know if we're talking about the same thing or 2 different things.
Yeah, I hear you. And in many ways, they are 2 different things, but they're not mutually exclusive of each other. And so I think I may have thrown everybody off with the word compliance.
Right, because that actually
is,
indicates a very specific legal thing that we do.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was real confused.
Right. So the reason that comes about, though, is because in your 60 roles and responsibilities, you are responsible as a board for oversight of compliance, right?
No, absolutely.
And you're also responsible as a board for understanding and sense making of the federal WIOA outcomes. And you are now adding, to your point, Sherry, the separate metrics in a scorecard that are bigger impact, right, is the hope, and bigger system. So the question really is, what do you feel is going to be the best structure to be able to do those things effectively, right? But I agree that Ben could be right here, that at this point, staff could make a set of recommendations and give them to you.
Well, here's the thing, though. The staff can make the recommendations. Again, I'm a little bit stuck on the word, but they can make recommendations around WIOA compliance. But we would make the recommendations about those other metrics that we want to go deeper on that we are requesting.
Yeah.
So it's a different tempo.
Sherry, I meant something a little different, which was just that when it comes to, oh, it's getting very meta. When it comes to the structure, the process for like who's doing what's the staff's role, what's a committee's role, what's the board's role, these kinds of questions that Lindsay has put on the screen here. I was suggesting that staff, perhaps with you as chair or initially to you as chair, may make a recommendation for how to structure these various roles and responsibilities. That's all I was saying. I wasn't trying to sort of forecast going forward what the particular staff role would be in metrics versus the board's role. For example, is really just these kind of process and roles and responsibilities I think are challenging to get into in a nuanced and meaningful way at the board meeting.
Oh yeah. Who's responsible for different elements of compliance for WIOA versus what we would like to dig deeper into are related but different. And so getting that information about who does what, when, are the reports staggered? Is the data come in staggered? That kind of thing. That'd be great from the staff. But then there's this separate line of thinking, I thought, which was our discussion about the 2 to 3 or 4 or whatever it is metrics that we're going to dig deeper on, that we want to be movers on, that we want to solicit. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So
I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I think it's good clarification. And I do think at this point, it does make the most sense. Sherry, if it's okay, perhaps this is a conversation with you and staff. And Venkat, if you're able to join as co-chair, I mean, really, that might be the best approach. The other questions, and Aaliyah, if you can scroll down, also maybe. I mean, I have pushed a little bit on this, but I am very curious your thoughts as board leadership in the executive committee, the lines of communication, the weak and the strong, the non-existent, the assumed, I think are really important. And so again, as we go into a new strategic plan and a scorecard, I think these are pieces, while maybe not exciting, important to clarify. We'll scroll down a little bit more, Aaliyah, just so folks can see the other topics here. Go ahead to board. Yes, so board discretionary funding as well as board membership. I think you would be remiss as an executive committee if you didn't answer some of these questions as you launch a new strategic plan and a new scorecard endeavor. And especially, I think, when you look at what you want to be able to achieve with your metrics, what it might take, and therefore, what is the board's capacity and appetite for fundraising in order to have money that's flexible to try out new things. And this is the same question that, for example, the Workforce Readiness Committee is going to have to answer and jump into. I think also what's come up, if it's not obvious, is board membership, right? Every opportunity with a new strategic plan, there's an opportunity to really look at, do we have the right members and who are we missing? And particularly when you all think about, you've adopted this definition of your larger system beyond just WIOA and the public workforce system, then are there key stakeholders and leaders that need to be brought in, and how that's done. So apologies if it feels like we got really stuck in that first part. But what I wanted to be able to do was present these as executive committee decisions and conversations that do need to happen, ideally, right, when you are launching into a new strategic plan. So I guess similarly, I would ask for strong opinions and thoughts and reactions. And then also, we can tackle these as a smaller group, staff and chair and vice chair to try to then create a proposal to hand back to the executive committee, if that makes sense.
Can you scroll back? Can you scroll back up again, Lizzie? And
yeah, thanks, Aaliyah. And we can send this out too. In fact, I think it's posted. So big topics being board membership, funding, lines of communication, committee structure.
Lindsay,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Lindsay, is some of this or the majority of this or all of this going to be part of the survey you were talking about, or could you share a little bit more about what you're thinking there?
Well, that's a great point, Todd. I would love to be able to include some decisions and maybe proposals in the survey. I want to keep that survey quite tight and short, but we could have a question per topic. If we're able to schedule a conversation, I think now with Todd, you and maybe Clay and then Sherry and Venkat, so we can at least narrow down some choices.
Maybe I missed, we're supposed to be commenting on these questions.
I was hoping the executive committee would have thoughts and comments on these questions. Yes.
Perhaps I have a thought. I don't know, around the discretionary funding, I would maybe add a bullet first. I'm not sure I see the board as a fundraiser for its own funding streams, but see it as an influence for existing funding streams for the workforce system more broadly. So the way I read this is that board discretionary funding is creating its own pot of money, and it's just not how I see the function of the WTDB.
That's a great clarification. And then that balanced out, I think, with comments and thoughts I've heard in the past from board members around, do we also have either influence over funding or access to funding that can be used for innovative, experimental, whatever it might be. But your clarification of this is influence over funding as opposed to.
And so go ahead, Sherry.
I was going to say, we do have some discretionary funding. Yeah. We do have, so I just want to clarify that. It's not that we're out trying to, get funding from other agencies. I think this is really more like the funding, the discretionary funding that we do get. How do we use it? How do we best leverage it? That type of thing. And our ability to influence funding.
Yeah,
I think.
Okay.
Sure. And as much as I'd love to frame this as like I just want to avoid scarcity around like the board being in some sort of position of competing with our workforce system partners that are out there doing the work. And so that's all as much as we can frame this about perhaps it's influencing over the flexibility of funding that the ecosystem gets, or I just want to be mindful of how the board is perceived in this space. That's my thoughts and perspectives.
Yep. That's great. Thank you, Sarah. We're at time here, but any other quick thoughts or perspectives? And then again, we will move this conversation to a smaller conversation and present it back.
Mine is just real quick. Everything that has been said, I support and agree with. One thing just I want to uplift from my lens that's very important is whatever we do and whatever approach we take, reconciling it with our role as a board so that then our role doesn't become further convoluted by all these things that are being presented. And so it will be helpful for me that, I know there's going to be, and I agree with the recommendation coming forward back to us, but it would be most helpful for me to then, even when that recommendation comes forward, to make sure that we're drawing back and just keeping top of mind our role as a board and how this aligns with that role, and maybe in some cases how it might be new or different, or something to further substantiate, you know, our existence, if you will.
So thank you for that, because I think that's where we can, and Todd, I will give you a final word here, but I do think that's a good ending point too, because the purpose of asking these strategic questions, I think, is precisely for the reason of how are we streamlining in many ways and making sense of our roles and responsibilities. And so that it doesn't feel like, well, sometimes we get a report on this and oh, maybe it's time for a report on this. And there's not a lot of effective and efficient sense making that can happen that way. So I do think that that's a great way to look at these strategic questions is how does this reconcile and support better implementation of our roles and responsibilities as a board. So that's great. Okay, Todd, last word, and then I am at time for my portion of the agenda.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I just wanted to add that Sherry and I and Venkat are meeting later this afternoon. That was already pre-planned. So this provides great fodder for us to consider. And, you know, not to speak on behalf of Clay, but we're pretty close colleagues. So I'll just say that he and I are happy to, after that conversation with Venkat and Sherry, to begin to put together some formal recommendations that come back to the board at a later date. And yesterday in our planning call with you, Lindsay, I'll just share with others, we talked about pulling together a bit of a smaller group around these to get some decisions made because we anticipated that it was going to be a little bit challenging to do that, have this conversation today. So look for some of you to sort of be tapped. We'll keep it relatively small, but that should help with sort of synthesizing recommendations and then in Lindsay's development of the survey that you're going to be seeing here in a short time. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. So we are going to go on to Oregon Services, and is Carrie Bauer on the line? Carrie's going to be speaking with us. Do we have Carrie?
She is on the way now. In the meantime, if you want to switch that and the WTDB membership piece.
Sure. We'll try to keep our time to 10 minutes. Todd, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sherry. There's been some talk, particularly in our previous strategic plan scorecard meetings with Lindsay's facilitation around the size of the board. And is it the right size at 40 plus members? Is there an opportunity to think about a little bit different size for the board so that we can ostensibly manage the board better, provide better customer service, have more opportunity to build relationships and our network? And so Sherry and I just sort of wanted to toss that out there and then maybe hear a little bit more from Sherry on her thoughts and then hear from others in terms of your thinking around the benefits, perhaps, I guess, say it this way, the benefits of the size of the board as it stands now, and then benefits and drawbacks if we were to consider lessening the number of members. So with that, I'll just toss it your way, Sherry, to sort of see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, how many people are on the board right now? Did you say? I'm sorry, I may have missed it.
It's right at about 40 right now.
40, okay.
That includes 5 ex officio non-voting members too.
Right. So we're one of the larger boards, I guess the largest board. And for me, I go two ways about this, having been on the board a long time and been on the board when it was a smaller board and then being on the board when it's a larger board. And one thing I have personally noticed, and I don't know if anybody else has been on the board a longer time, maybe Anne has also seen this, is that when we were a smaller board, we definitely were working hard on a lot of things, but as we grew, we had more influence. As we grew and got to be a bigger board, we had more opportunities for committees, more opportunities to impact things that, ended up being things like Future Ready, more opportunities to utilize our discretionary funding, more, and I felt like our size has helped us in some sense. But on the flip side of that, this is a management issue for the staff to manage a board this big. I am on a lot of boards and have managed a board. And the one thing about boards is that, you're going to look at whoever's on the board, you're going to have some percentage of attrition of focus, which is natural. Everybody's very busy. So let's say that is 25 to 30%. So whatever your number is, you cut 25, 35% really kind of off because they are there to help, but they're not really able to engage. So one concern I do have is going too low, that the ability to have impact and engagement drops because of that natural factor about people's engagement. I appreciate and respect the role of the ex officio folks, but then I do wonder if that's 5 that we could, not have, that would bring the total number down. And for me, I think that finding where our sweet spot is, that through natural attrition, as nobody's like, hey, it's time for you to go, but through natural attrition, is important. But I have this worry because having been a staff person, also managing the board, there's two things. There's one, too many people on the board, and then there's the other, not enough people on the board. Both of them put a burden on staff, both ways. So anyway, that I'm just babbling, but those are my thoughts. So I'm open to hear other people's thoughts.
I'll chime in. One of the things that come to mind with this board and having also served and currently serving in different capacities is what kind of representation do we want and need around the table in this space? Again, that directly aligns with our work, but when you talk about workforce talent and development, maybe and I just keep saying, for me, it probably would be a good reminder to see and I probably just need to look at the breakdown of the individuals in the industry, like what industries and types of organizations are represented around the table. That would be helpful, because when we talk about the statewide representation, that's one piece. Also considering, demographics, regions, what regions are represented, what regions aren't represented. So some of those things come to mind in terms of looking at the overall makeup of the board and the representation around the table. And, I could also go either way. I can only imagine logistically trying to wrangle in schedules and coordinate individuals, and I just see what my team has to do on the college side, and I can only imagine on the staff side what that looks like. So there's some of that, but also I find that it's cliche, but power in numbers in terms of when we come together, and from just having conversations, you generate different ideas that then could translate to something that's transformative overall. And so I would, if I could put a recommendation or suggestion out there, I would say that while we're reconfiguring and developing our strategy, continue the conversation. And at the same time, when we have that strategy, we're working with Lindsay, when we have it done and ready, then let's go back and revisit. Okay, this is where we're currently positioned to do our work. This is where how we envision our work ahead in the coming years, and grounding it in our overall purpose. And now let's think through, do we have not the right or wrong people, but do we have the best fit aligned for WTDB for the work that is needed to be accomplished? So those are just my perspectives there.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And it reminded me, I forgot to say that one of the reasons the board expanded to its current number was for that demographic inclusiveness. We wanted to have more people, more representation, people who provide additional services, wraparound services, nonprofit, you know, so we did expand. The reason we are the size we are was exactly that reason of trying to make sure that we were catching folks who are connected to the workforce process. So,
and I have just one question, just because, and I might have missed it, but do we have like labor union representation around the table? And the reason I asked, who is that?
Josh, are you
Josh?
here?
Okay, AFL.
Well,
Okay,
first, let me just answer your question really quick in terms of membership requirements per the federal
Yeah.
regs, Adrian.
Okay.
So we're required to have at least 51% of the makeup of the board be from business. The intention there, all the way back to WIA and before, was to make sure that business and industry had a strong voice to drive the work of the State Workforce Board. There are a couple other prescriptive requirements in the law, one of which is there has to be at least 2 labor representatives, which we have. We actually, I would argue, have more than that currently. We also have another category that we have to satisfy, which is 20% of the overall board members have to be from workforce. So that would include, you know, folks like local boards, and other workforce related membership, community-based organizations, nonprofits. It could also be agencies that aren't necessarily mandated by the law. Speaking of agencies, there are mandated agencies that have to be part of the board. We also have to have representation, which Sherry fills one of those seats, from small business. So it's not all just about large and middle-sized companies and organizations. And then there's one other one around registered apprenticeship to make sure that we have somebody from JATC. So more to come on that, but I love your idea about getting back into the details of what we look like currently in terms of sectoral representation, because that was a big part of the growth strategy years ago. Was we didn't think and feel at the time, with a conversation very much like this, that there was enough intentionality and data-backed decision-making around the mix of the board. That's when we brought in, for the very first time ever in the board's existence, wood products, believe it or not, which still represents a huge part of Oregon's economy, particularly in rural areas and frontier areas. We lost them during COVID, so we have a vacancy in that space, but I'll stop there because I could go on a little bit about it, as you can imagine. But we did actually, at one point in time when Boards and Commissions was tracking diversity of our board, we had the highest rating of any of the states. I don't know, Sarah, is it 275 or so state level boards? We had the highest ranking in terms of our diverse makeup of board membership. So
yeah, and that actually, and Kim made the correction, 50+1.
50+1. Okay.
Right. Todd had said 51%, I think.
Well, it's a majority.
50?
It's got to be a majority.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
So
It's a nuance, but there is a difference between 51 and 50+1.
But
I
that
just never knew half a person.
But that is how the board got to its size. So that's the answer, because we have these requirements and we have these things. And so in order to expand outward, we ended up with more people, which I honestly don't think ended up being a bad thing. I mean, I can't speak for Todd and Clay and at the time Julia and others, but I felt that it helped from when we were smaller. But that being said, that doesn't mean we can't revisit our size overall. So again, any other thoughts about this?
Well, real quick, can we, where will I locate the prescriptive outline that Todd, you were mentioning? That's what reg is that referenced in?
It's in WIOA section 101D. I'll send you something.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
No problem.
Thank you.
No,
I'll
thank
send it out
you.
to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Adrian. Those are all good questions and good clarifications. Other thoughts, folks who've been on the board a while?
I do like Adrian's idea or suggestion that we put the strategic plan fully together and then say, what do we need? I think that sounds really wise to me. They say one thing today, and an easy solution to be like, okay, let's cut 10, get to 30 and see if it's a little more manageable, but at least we're not too small. But then maybe we're missing, or we might regret making a change that after we have that plan together might inform different thinking. But
I
I'm with
agree
you,
with that.
Sherry. There's no right answer. Like sometimes some seasons call for smaller, some seasons call for larger, it's like.
Yeah, I agree with what Anne was saying. I was thinking the same thing. I think it's hard to kind of come up with a number in a vacuum. Like, what's the rationale behind it, right? So I think it's easier if you have the plan and say, what is the function, and then define the goal.
Sorry, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I will express a bias towards for policy-oriented boards, which I think this board intends to be. I have a bias towards smaller rather than larger. I think that it is the desire for representation pulls boards to become larger and larger, and yet they still fall short of true representation and inclusion. You will not get every sector, even every critical workforce sector represented on this board, nor will you have every sort of category of worker and employer represented on the board, even agencies. So I think that the appropriate sort of model for thinking about a policy board is not through the lens of representation, although I think the statutory requirements do nod at least towards, employer-centered, labor represented, and workforce system oriented. And then I think it should be about a size, and again, my bias is smaller, that can sort of meaningfully provide, engage with each other in tough conversations and provide compelling policy leadership. And I think I think it's harder for a board to cohere in that type of way when it is as large as this one. So that's just my my 2 cents. I generally agree with other statements around, it may depend on the specific topic, but looking broadly, or the specific strategy, but looking broadly, I think for this type of board, or the way it envisions itself becoming, I would lean towards smaller.
I think the question just is, what is smaller? You know what I mean? For me, I go back to smaller, to me, is from 40 to maybe 30, because there is an attrition, and I don't mean, there's just a work attrition in a board. And then you go to 20, you're down to 12, or you're down to 15, and it's just not workable. It's not functional. And so from having been on the board from smaller to bigger, I have seen more impact bigger, just my own experience. I've seen us be able to be more nimble, more aggressive, and more responsive, bigger than we were when we were smaller. Sarah?
I wonder if there's some sort of way, I think I mentioned this at one of the scorecard meetings, is there have been a number of different additional advisory committees that the HEC has stood up, and they're also very big. And they also include some of you and me on this call. And so how can we, because I'm a proponent of smaller, if you can then, when you are making recommendations and engaging on, in particular areas of expertise in which you couldn't possibly have in a broader strategic board like the WTDB, that you have relationships with those advisory committees, and you can work together and in concert, rather than standing up all of these bigger separate entities. And I do think there's an opportunity for the WTDB to potentially get smaller, but not because you have your arm in some of these other advisory councils that are in alignment with the WTDB strategic plan. Because and from someone who has the pleasure of having a lot of different boards in my portfolio at the governor's office, and how many we have to continue to reassess and put in front of the governor to appoint, whether it's through Senate confirmation or just regular appointments. It's a lot of work. So smaller the better. But hear the need to have a larger coalition speaking about the activities outlined in the WTDB.
Yeah, well, I thank you for that. And I think what I'm hearing is two things. One, smaller, but again, the question is, what do we mean by smaller? That's just an open question. I mean, I just don't think this is just my personal preference. I don't think a board of 15 or 20 is going to be effective. I just don't. I think you're going to just not have, you're just going to have people who aren't there. And we go back to kind of where we were when I came on. But smaller, but like, what does that number look like? And then the second thing is Anne's suggestion about getting the strategic, getting this done. And Adrian was putting forward like, hey, let's see what it is and then let's discuss it. I think that's a great idea. I think that Adrian, Ann, and somebody else, you all kind of hit up on that. And I think that's a good idea. So I know Venkat Carey's here, and I do want to give Carey full time. So we'll have Venkat and then we'll pivot to Carey.
Sherry, I just wanted to say that hearing the conversations, I also am in the camp of smaller is better, just because it's harder to engage all members if you're too large, and then there's a risk of less meaningful discussion. And finally, decision-making towards coming up with policies is going to be slower. And so what is optimal? I don't know, 25 to 35 if I were to take a swag. But I like the idea of going through the strategic plan, number one, and number two, starting with what's required by us, by law, right, in terms of 50% plus one, and then the right representation across our top economic sectors. We can just filter. We don't have to include all of them, but we could possibly filter by them to reach an optimal size.
Okay. Well, thank you for that as a good summary. I don't know if anybody else is getting a thing that says new group chat requests. You have a message from a new contact. I keep getting this. If you do, don't open it. It says unknown teams email or something. Just FYI. I keep getting this weird thing.
You can block it, and I'll send you a little screenshot on how to you can make yourself such that they can't send those to you.
Okay.
So there's a privacy setting.
Yeah, I just didn't know if anybody else was getting that.
No.
Carey, we are ready for you to take center stage.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for having me today. I think this is my first time at a WTDB exec committee. This came about because I had shared out internally some education award data for AmeriCorps and some of the impacts of AmeriCorps members throughout the state. And Todd and I were talking about that this would be something that you all would probably be interested to hear more about. And we thought it'd be a great vehicle to maybe get some conversation started on maybe future partnership and workforce efforts and whatnot. So I'm going to share a little bit to jump in just who we are as Oregon Serves, a little bit about AmeriCorps, and then share more of that education award data and some of the opportunities for workforce. Todd, did you have it looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, I just thought folks might like to know. So Carey is in the Office of Workforce Investments, where Clay and I are with the Workforce and Talent Development Board, and we're all at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission under Ben, and then of course Julia is over the Office of Workforce Investment. Thanks, Carey.
Yeah, thanks for that. So if you want to do that next slide, Aaliyah, I will share a little more about that myself too. So my name is Carey Bauer, Director of the Oregon Serves State Service Commission. So what that means is that we are a state service commission that is established since 1994 through the National Community Service Trust Act. Every state, Commonwealth, and territory has a state service commission. So there's 52 of us in the network. And our primary responsibility is to administer AmeriCorps grants to eligible entities, so schools, local government, nonprofits, et cetera, and to develop a vision for service, volunteerism, and civic engagement for our state. We also are tasked with providing training and technical assistance for all the AmeriCorps branches in the state, and being an advocate for expansion and awareness of the impacts of AmeriCorps, creating additional service opportunities, be it through fund development, policy making, and so forth. And in addition to the commission staff, we also have a commission board that also has some required roles similar to what you all have, from representation across the state, things like the local labor, local business, local government, older adults in volunteerism, volunteer managers, emergency response managers. We have a long list of required roles so that we're representing various sectors in our work. And as Todd mentioned, so we are within the state of Oregon. We, for many, many, many years, something like 20-something years, were actually part of Oregon Housing, and we came to the HEC in 2018. And are, as Todd mentioned, under the Office of Workforce Investments alongside Oregon Youth Works and WTDB and other WIOA programs here. You can go to the next slide. And actually, I'll just say really quick, those are just old Polaroids and photos that I brought with me from the old office at PSU. There was an old box of 20 years of service pictures. And the guy on the left actually later served on our board, but he was in the first cohort in 1994. So very fun. So that's a little bit about us as a state service commission, just in summary. So we administer grants, and then we provide that TTA and policy development around expanding service opportunities and civic engagement opportunities. So what is AmeriCorps then? Some people, you might be familiar with it. Some people who have never heard of it, I usually say it's like the Peace Corps, but like in the US, because people do typically tend to know what the Peace Corps is, at least. So that is basically it. It's an opportunity for people to sign up and give back to their community, make a difference in their community, address, the emerging needs and those areas, while also getting, skill development, being given opportunities for advanced training, credentials, certificates, networking, all kinds of support that is going to help them with their future goals in continued education or career attainment. You can go to the next slide. So they do that under these focus areas. These are the primary AmeriCorps focus areas. And when we issue a request for applications for grants to local entities that want to run an AmeriCorps program and then hire AmeriCorps members and put them out in the community, we do that under these areas and under the governor's priorities. So we will say we're accepting grant applications under these, but also, in particular, we're looking to address workforce shortages in these areas, or address programs that will operate in these parts of the state or provide services to these specific populations. You can go to the next slide. And when you serve in AmeriCorps, I always say there's three beneficiaries. There's the community that is getting something out of this, or generally seeing big increase in capacity building. The AmeriCorps member themselves is getting all of those things that I mentioned, and then they're providing services to someone. And so that's generally, they're doing mentoring or tutoring in schools. They're running food banks or developing marketing plans for a local nonprofit, or even providing emergency response services. So in summary, they're able to make a difference, to see something direct, direct impact of the work that they're doing. They can serve anywhere in the US, but of course, we want them to serve in Oregon. They receive many financial benefits. So when they're doing that service, it's not just like a job. There's a lot of additional support around it. And some of the other benefits are a little different too. They do get health insurance, they get child care assistance, they get mental health insurance, they get a living stipend. And some programs will also provide additional benefits like transportation cards or a housing stipend. But one of the things that really makes such a big difference is that there is a huge focus on member development and providing those opportunities for professional development. You go to the next one. And at the end of their term of service, that's kind of what I mentioned in the first part of my intro, they receive money for school. So that education award that I mentioned. When they're serving, as I mentioned, they get the monthly stipend and all those other benefits. But at the end, they get something called an Ed Siegel Education Award. And that is equivalent to the Pell Grant. And so they're able to use that both to either, to pay off student loans or to go back to school. Let me go to the next slide. And this is just a quick view of what those amounts look like. So right now, if someone serves 1,700 hours, serves a full program term, 1 year, they are going to receive an award of $73.95. And then that's prorated if they do lesser time. You can go to the next one. And so, I'm sorry, this is like a little small, but this is originally kind of what started the conversation, is that I was updating the data to see, like, so how much are people serving? How much have people earned since AmeriCorps existed in Oregon, and what are they doing with those funds? And this is a little bit about what I thought was so cool to see that I wanted to share, is that since 1994, people serving in Oregon have earned $73 million in education awards. When they earn their award, they can go somewhere else and spend it, or someone that has earned it in another state can spend it here. But what we do know is that of awards that have been earned here, almost 46 million have been put back either into local universities and colleges or have been used to pay off student loans to the amount of 12.1 million. So this is a huge deal for members to be able to get this funding, but I think it's also, we need to talk a little bit more about the impact they're having, what they're putting back into our universities and colleges. One of the things too that I like to mention is that Oregon is one of only 6 states out of all of the 52 states and Commonwealth territories that have AmeriCorps that does not put state tax on the education award. And that was something we were able to get passed in the legislature a few years ago. And we really like that as a tool to be able to have, as a recruitment tool, and say, serve here or come spend your education award here, so that we can increase, the talent and workforce within Oregon through that. It's still federally taxed, but the state tax was something that we heard from alumni that was a burden for them, because they've just served and given back to their community and not earned a ton of money for it. And so to be able to then use their Ed Award and get taxed on it and have a tax burden was a barrier for them. And we wanted to remove that barrier and say, thank you for putting your time in and doing this in Oregon. So we're really excited to have that passed. On top of that, the other thing I wanted to share on this slide is just what is going back into local universities and colleges. So this is the top 20, and this is data from 1994 to 2023. And you'll see in this chart that right now PSU has received about $7 million in AmeriCorps awards, PCC $5 million, OSU almost $4 million, et cetera. And also, I just want to see really quick if there's any questions before I keep going.
Yes, I do have a question. I was trying to get to my, so as you talk about this, I guess the question for this board is, what can we do to help you in your work, given, who we are and what we do? Like, what could, so anyway, just leave that with you.
Perfect setup for next slide. Thank you. So what I wanted to communicate is just shared that I think there's so many more additional opportunities. I think we are underutilizing AmeriCorps in our workforce goals, and there is just a lot of opportunity, I think, to get the word out there that hire AmeriCorps members, hire alumni, offer benefits. If you're a university or college, offer awards to maximize the education award, and I'll talk about that in some slides down the road here. But what I wanted to highlight and express why I get really passionate talking about how amazing AmeriCorps is that the data speaks for itself. AmeriCorps members say this is an amazing opportunity for them, that it sets them up for the future. And what I think is really important for others to know too is that all of the program models for AmeriCorps that AmeriCorps members are hired under go through a strict evidence building and evaluation process. So it's very much based on proven interventions and proven models, both for the services they're providing, but for the skill development and so forth that's happening for the AmeriCorps members that participate. And these are just some highlights of some of the, I guess, feedback that AmeriCorps members have given about their service, that they do develop useful work skills, that it helps them become invested in their community, that they feel it expands their personal and professional and educational goals, and helps them figure out sort of like what they want to do next and what the right fit is for them. Next slide, please. And most of them, you know, have some things to say about, some really great things to say about what they're learning through that. They can handle things that come their way. They're able to stick to their goals. They're able to deal with things unexpectedly. And from some of the data that has been put together from just surveys of employers, is that they have said, you know, when we see AmeriCorps on a resume, we think this person knows how to deal with conflict. They are, you know, they know how to be part of a team. They work well in a team. They've got good communication skills. They're good at community organizing. They are developing problem solving skills, and are really recognizing that this is, you know, these are great people to add to their workforce. Let me go next slide. So a couple of initiatives that I just wanted to mention and highlight. One is Schools of National Service, and the other one will be Employers of National Service. But there are like 1.2 million alumni of AmeriCorps, and AmeriCorps has something called Schools of National Service, and essentially that's a database where a university or college can sign up and become part of this this index that all of those alumni can access and say, what are benefits that I can get out of going to college here? Where can I spend my education award and maximize it, leverage it further? So to be a School of National Service, essentially you just have to say that you're providing some sort of benefit to a AmeriCorps member if they come and spend their education award at your university or college. That could be anything from tuition matches or discounts. It can be credit for service, priority admission for enrollment, instant state tuition rates, or fee waivers. And so that is something that I will follow up with additional links and fact sheets on, and show the form for how to do that. But as of right now, we only have about 4 that are signed up, and we want to expand that. So we're really looking to spread the word and you know, build this database for Oregon so that we can attract more AmeriCorps members into the higher education system. And next slide. Then the other initiative is Employers of National Service. And this is one where we're just encouraging people to really think about hiring AmeriCorps members, prioritize hiring AmeriCorps members, advertise that you hire AmeriCorps members. You can do things such as recruit on AmeriCorps job boards, give higher priority hiring points, you know, other things like that. And again, just as like Schools of National Service, you become part of a database that these alumni are looking through and, you know, seeing who understands their service, the impact of it, and values that and wants to welcome them into the workforce. I don't have too many other, I just have my contact info as the last slide here. But one thing that I would add too is that, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is that we have been at the HEC for, I guess, 7 years, and we're really focusing so much right now between the other programs at OE on really leveraging these different grants together and really creating service to career pathways. We are actually part of National Governors Association's Service to Career Pathways Policy Academy right now, where we are working with other programs within OE and Governor's Office and whatnot to create pathways from, say, Oregon Youth Works into Oregon Serves, and prioritizing those shortages in youth and mental behavioral health, youth mental and behavioral health, environmental stewardship and clean energy, and education. And so this is all part of looking at how we can expand service opportunities and really partner and be a greater, I think, partner within the bigger workforce system. And so with that, I will just say, let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for letting me come and share my passion about AmeriCorps and how amazing it is.
Thank you. Todd, you have your hand up, or is it from before?
No, it's a new hand, and now it's gone. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate you seeing me. Hey, Carrie, I'm wondering a couple of things. One, would it make sense to you? So I sort of hear this advocacy and building awareness around um, the youth that participate in your programs and helping them find connections to employers. It made me think of a couple of things. One, would there be value for you if you already have maybe a flyer, leave behind on some of this that you could send to me, and then we could distribute it out to board members to distribute further out in their networks to
Yes,
help?
absolutely.
And then the second thing
Absolutely.
the second thing I was wondering, and you've probably already done this, or maybe you already said this, but I know from time to time, Kim, I don't want to steal your thunder, but from time to time there are, job fairs at local, regional Workforce Oregon centers and other partners. I wondered if you'd ever thought of or had or in the process of maybe an AmeriCorps job fair kind of a thing. Um, uh, as one new wrinkle to a job fair to get those folks in front of employers in person on a regular cadence basis.
Was that a question for me or?
Yes, I wondered if you had,
Oh.
if that would make sense to you, if you've already done it.
No. We, I like that idea. I think that there's definitely more we could do around job fairs specific to that. We tend to go to various recruitment fairs and whatnot, but I think that there is more opportunity, and definitely if you have some lists of ones that we should know more about, we would want to participate in that.
I'm happy to reach out to the local workforce boards and see if they have interest in partnering with you on that. So thank you very much, Carrie.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hello. Well, thank you, Carrie. One of the things I was thinking about in your presentation was the employability skills discussion we had, and maybe a suggestion of, I don't know if Todd, if you can share more, if Carrie, you already know about that, but marrying the employability skills that the AmeriCorps volunteers have and maybe enumerating what they are for employers, since that's always been a perennial uh, discussion with employers about something they're concerned about and they want to see. And maybe there's a way we can at least share what we know around employability skills, and you can marry that to what you data or whatever training or whatever you have to make that match and just to enhance that elevation you were talking about. So that came to my mind.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Questions? Anything else we have to vote on or do? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I know we've been having some marathons. We've been 2 hours, 3 hours. So you all have been really good eggs. So thank you all, and we give you 11 minutes back or something. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.